Welcome to Spiritual Dialogues with Father Udon de Castro. We are here at Cariana Lay Monastic Community. I'm your host, Brother Lodi. With us is Sister Tachi. Sister?
Yes, Father. Father will continue explaining about Monsignor Box's reasoning.
Yeah, so what we are doing right now is because somebody have raised a doubt which we consider as valid. We're going to examine it because the doubt was placed on the fact that probably our present Pope, Pope Francis, has been invalidly elected. Now, as we have mentioned before, many people have written about these things with regard to the past popes, but it was very clearly shown that what their reasoning was illogical, against logic, without proof, and therefore we did not take any attention to those accusations. And the only reason we are taking into account what Monsignor Box is saying with regard to Pope Francis is because he gave proof, which we are forced now to examine so we can resolve whether Pope Francis is really a pope or not, because that is a very important issue.
Yes, Father.
A very important issue in the sense that if he is the pope, we must continue to follow him and obey him and respect him and so on. But if he's not the true pope, then we must have nothing to do with him.
Yes, Father.
Under pain of mortal sin, in other words, if he's not the pope and we still follow him, we could go to hell. So we are examining the arguments on both sides, and we are trying to examine the arguments presented by Monsignor Box, why he believed that Pope Francis' election during the last conclave was invalid. And like we mentioned, we begin with natural reasoning, common sense. Now, if we use common sense, what Monsignor Box said with regard to Pope Francis will not make sense.
Okay.
Because it is a little bit above common sense. And this is the reason why many people, the common tao, are not reacting, are not impressed with what has been said, are not disturbed, and are not even confused. It doesn't affect them because they don't know what's going on.
Yes, Father.
Because it did not fall under the category of common sense. We have to go a little bit higher than common sense. And this is, you have to go to the level of canon law, at least.
Oh my God.
And common law is a little bit between common sense and supernatural thing and so on like that.
Canon law is the basis of writing the doctrine of the Church.
Not really. This is the man-made laws of the Catholic Church. It's man-made.
For example,
Based on the
regarding
teaching of
elections,
Christ.
for example, is that what you're saying?
It's based
There is
on the
a canon
teaching,
law.
based on the teaching of God, but made by man. And it always deals with human affairs,
Activities, like-
human
like
activities,
elections.
like election and so
Okay.
on like that. So in other words, the rules of papal election is no longer under the category of canon law. It's no longer. I mean,
No,
not
it's
under common
common
sense,
sense,
no, it's
but
no
under
longer
canon
common
law,
sense,
okay.
but it's under canon law. And the popes had always made laws with regard to papal election. They always made. Because they're the ones who make the law, canon law, the popes. And the most recent documents on papal election is by Pope Paul VI. He made one, but he retracted. He made a document but took it back. So nobody knows about it. And it's about the election of popes, a legendo of popes, the election of popes. And the other document mentioned by Monsignor Box is made by Pope John Paul II. And it seems that these two popes had been watching election. Of course, they were attending the papal election, and they noticed there was some hunky-punky probably going on during the election. So they wrote down that this is not allowed. If you do this again, then the papal election is invalid. And so Pope Paul VI made one, but I don't know why he withdrew it. He took it back. So it's not published for everybody.
And that into effect because he took it back.
It didn't take effect.
They take that.
But fortunately, before he could take it back, he had mistakenly given the go signal to publish it.
Really?
So a few copies were sent, and we know the
Allowed,
contents.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So we know the contents. Then Pope John Paul II noticed probably that there was really some hunky-punky going on. And this time, he was sure there was something wrong going on. Because Monsignor Box mentioned the names of the people who were doing this hunky-punky business during the election of John Paul II. He knew them by name and mentioned them by name. So Pope John Paul II knew it was bad, what they were doing. It was against the conclave laws of election of the Pope. So he made a document, Dominici Egregi, something like that, on the election, where he made prohibitions, to the point that he said, if anybody who violates these prohibitions, the election of the Pope is automatically invalid. It doesn't have to be announced. Because it has to be announced by the cardinals. Ordinarily, it has to be announced by the cardinal that it is invalid. No. But he says, but this time, it's automatically invalid. It doesn't have to be announced.
Okay.
And so Monsignor Box, who is part of the office of the congregation, exposed that this violation definitely occurred during the election of Pope Francis. There was a violation of the rules of the conclave, and he gave the names of those who violated the rules of the conclave.
Is there no reaction from the comment of Mr. Box or Father Box?
Monsignor.
Well, that's the point, because this doesn't form under the category of common sense. Practically, there is no reaction all around the world.
I see.
Because it doesn't form. And the trouble is because people these days do not have common sense anyway. They would have not noticed it, even if it fell under the category of common sense. But people also are not conscious of canon law.
Yes,
Because canon law has been changed. There's a new canon law, the 1980 version. And these documents of the Pope were not very clearly included in canon law. So you have to read this document of these two popes, and bishops and cardinals ordinarily do not read these documents.
Well, Father,
Even if these are all mailed to them, well, it's too long, it's usually in Latin. They have no time to read it, they're lazy to read it.
right.
And very seldom do bishops and cardinals read all these long documents. In fact, when Pope John Paul II read that beautiful encyclical Veritatis Splendor,
yes.
he wrote down that the bishops should read it. And I still have to find a bishop who have read it.
Unfortunately,
At least me. The bishops that I meet, I know, have not read it. And it's a beautiful encyclical. So there we have the reason we are discussing this, because canon law doesn't know this. The canonists, do not know this. They have not read it. They have not mentioned it. They have not reacted to it. common sense doesn't know it, and though practically the whole world is not reacting to it. And yet it is an issue that has to be resolved because the very salvation of our soul depends on it, because it is a matter of faith.
Yes.
It is a doctrine of faith that we should know who is the true Pope.
Yes. Because, Father, when there's a Pope, we follow what he says.
Yeah, he's the one who confirms whether our faith is the right faith or not.
He makes announcement and then you obey.
And he reminds us how to go to
heaven.
He reminds us the teachings of the Catholic Church. Very
He's
important role.
supposed to do that.
Very important role, yeah.
Okay, Father. So so it's very important. Everybody should be concerned about the validity or invalidity of this Pope's election.
They have to resolve the doubt. Probably.
Yes.
He is the Pope, probably.
I mean, you're asking each one to just study it and see.
Yes, because a valid doubt has been raised.
So each one should, for the salvation of each one's soul, that's your responsibility.
Exactly.
Do something, do something about it, at least for yourself.
Yeah, like when Martin Luther was preaching, nobody practically raised any doubt about his teachings.
Then how many souls were lost with that?
Then when they raised the doubts, it was too late. So many souls were lost.
Yes, Father. Yes, and so?
And so we have to resolve the doubt. Mm-hmm. And we notice that common sense cannot resolve it. Canon law can resolve it, but that does not necessarily resolve a theological dogmatic question. Mm-hmm. Canon law cannot, because it's still in the natural level. Mm-hmm. It's made by priests, by cardinals, by bishops, by pope, but canon law is still in the natural level. Okay. It's above canon law, but it's the natural level. So we have to resolve it through the theological level.
Okay.
And we have mentioned before how to resolve it, which is just find out who has the 4 visible signs of the Catholic Church. That's the simplest. The 4 visible signs is known by all Catholics. It's in the Catechism. 1, Holy, Catholic, Apostolic. See whether he has the 4 signs or not. Because if he doesn't have the sign, whether he was validly elected or not, he is not the Pope.
Yes, Father, it follows.
It follows.
If he's not Catholic, he cannot be the head of the Catholic Church.
He cannot be. So that is the easiest way. But then you might ask, but he's in Rome and we are here in the Philippines. How can we check it out?
Well, Catholic means universal. We should learn about it.
No, he makes statements, and the statements reach us. He has made actions. The actions reports have reached us.
In other words, those signs of the true church are visible.
Visible to us.
So no matter where
How
they
far
are, even if he's in Rome, you can find out if he has those visible signs, because they're visible.
Yeah.
So he speaks, he writes, he acts, he behaves. He does a lot of visible things which we can study and analyze. So that's possible using the 4 visible signs. And that's the most reliable sign. Except the problem is more Catholics, even bishops and priests, do not know what are the 4 signs. They know the 4 signs by enumerating the 4 signs, but they cannot explain it. They do not know what it really means. And many lay Catholic doesn't have any idea whatsoever what those 4 signs mean. They recite it every Sunday Mass.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, Father, because it's not very clear to me, Father.
Yeah, it's not really very clear because it is something supernatural. Though it's visible, but the interpretation and the meaning of the 4 signs are supernatural. That's why, for instance, the Catholic Church is holy.
Yeah.
I mean, that holiness is not visible. It is spiritual holiness.
And it's more mystifying, Father, because holiness is more than that word holy. It means that you have that inside of you, that holiness.
Yeah, strictly speaking, holiness is something purely spiritual, but you're right, Brother Lodi. People can feel holiness. Like many people whom I met when they saw Pope John Paul II come to the Philippines, they all felt his
Yes,
holiness.
yes, that's true, Father.
Father, we have only 30 seconds, please.
So there we have to use theological means to resolve this doubt that has been raised. But we really have to resolve it. And we're saying that we're using first those four visible signs taught to us in the catechism of what is a true Catholic. And all we have to do is check whether Pope Francis has those four visible signs or not.
Thank you very much, Father. This program, Dialogues, Spiritual Dialogue with Father Doti Castro, as I said, can be likened to a salt that preserve, because Father like to preserve what is true doctrine of the Catholic faith. And it enlightens the mind once you understand what Father have explained, which means that salvation of our soul is sure. Thank you very much, my sister, brother, for listening. See you again. Thank you.
Hosanna, Hosanna.